Hi, and welcome to this training on ethics and professional behavior. So let's start with the big picture. When we talk about ethics, we're talking about how we show up for our clients, for each other, and for this work. Ethics guide how we provide care, how we set boundaries, and how we navigate complicated decisions. But ethics aren't about being perfect. They're about being honest, thoughtful, and willing to reflect. And here's the truth. You will hit gray areas. Sometimes your personal values will conflict with your professional code. Sometimes the agency you work for, yes, even JADE, might have practices or pressures that don't neatly line up with your discipline standards or your personal morals. And that's not a sign that something's broken. It's a sign that you've hit an ethical moment. And that's exactly where you want to pause, reflect, and ask. So the goal of this training isn't to scare you or box you in. It's to help you feel confident navigating these moments because that's where real ethical practice lives. So what even are ethics? At their core, ethics are the shared standards of behavior that guide our professions. They're created by licensing boards and professional organizations to help define what it means to act with safety, care, and integrity, whether you're a counselor, a nurse, a peer specialist, or part of the admin team. But ethics codes don't give us every answer. They can't anticipate every situation, and most of them, they're written after something went wrong. Somebody was harmed, a boundary was crossed. So ethical practice isn't about memorizing rules, it's about being thoughtful, proactive, and present in real-world situations that codes can't fully predict. And let's be real, the world is changing fast. Technology, culture, norms, expectations, they evolve constantly. So when a situation doesn't fit neatly into the code, we rely on judgment, supervision, and our shared values. We're not here to police each other, we're here to protect what matters most. A place where clients feel safe and staff feel supported in doing the right thing, even when it's hard. Most codes, whether you're a nurse, a peer, a therapist, or a prescriber, will rest on a shared set of moral principles. They're like the compass behind the guidelines that we follow. We're going to take a few minutes and walk through each one. And as I go, I want you to think about how each of these shows up in your own work, because I guarantee that they do, even if you're not a therapist. Autonomy is about supporting the client's right to make their own decisions. As one of my favorite Peloton instructors, Dennis Morton, says, I make suggestions, you make decisions. That's autonomy. But here's where it gets tricky. What happens when somebody's not fully able to make sound decisions themselves? Think about clients with maybe severe and persistent mental illness like schizophrenia, or a client that's actively intoxicated, or an adolescent with no real support system, or maybe even an elderly client with signs of cognitive impairment. We still have to respect their autonomy, but we also have to weigh it against their ability to understand risks or consequences. That's where collaboration, supervision, and transparency are essential. Non-malfeasance is the idea that we don't do harm. And that seems really simple, right? But it's more than just don't abuse people or don't yell at your clients. It includes subtle harms too, the kind that we might not always recognize in the moment, like showing up late, or missing documentation deadlines, or overstepping boundaries, or coming to work under the influence and thinking that you're holding it together. So let's be honest, even if you think nobody notices, they do. Clients notice, coworkers notice, and whether or not you meant harm, being impaired at work, in body or mind, is a breach of trust, and it's a risk to client care, and it's a violation of this principle. Non-malfeasance means that we have to ask ourselves hard questions. Could this hurt someone, even if I don't mean to? Is this safe? And am I showing up in a way that honors the vulnerability of the people that I'm here to serve? It's not always easy to sit with these questions, but that's part of what makes this work sacred. And it brings us to something old, foundational, and still relevant today, the Hippocratic Oath. Now, most of us aren't doctors. Most of us didn't enter the field through medical school. We came through counseling, social work, nursing, peer support, administration, and other paths. But the spirit of the Hippocratic Oath, first do no harm, still holds true. So I'd like to invite you, regardless of your professional title, to take this moment with me. You don't have to say it out loud if you're at your desk or on a loud bus or wherever you're watching this, but maybe pause here. And when you're in a safe, quiet space, come back and say it with me. This is the modern version of the Hippocratic Oath. I swear to fulfill to the best of my ability and judgment this covenant. I will respect the hard-won scientific gains of those physicians in whose steps I walk, and gladly share such knowledge as is mine with those who are to follow. I will apply for the benefit of the sick all measures that are required, avoiding those twin traps of overtreatment and therapeutic nihilism. I will remember that there is art to medicine as well as science, and that warmth, sympathy, and understanding may outweigh the surgeon's knife or the chemist's drug. I will not be ashamed to say, I know not, nor will I fail to call in my colleagues when the skills of another are needed for a patient's recovery. I will respect the privacy of my patients, for their problems are not disclosed to me that the world may know. Most especially must I tread with care in matters of life and death. If it is given to me to save a life, all thanks. But it may be also within my power to take a life. This awesome responsibility must be faced with great humbleness and awareness of my own frailty. Above all, I must not play God. I will remember that I do not treat a fever chart, a cancerous growth, but a sick human being whose illness may affect the person's family and economic stability. My responsibility includes these related problems if I am to care adequately for the sick. I will prevent disease whenever I can, for prevention is preferable to cure. I will remember that I remain a member of society with special obligations to my fellow human beings, those sound of mind and body as well as the infirm. If I do not violate this oath, may I enjoy life and art, respected while I live, and remembered with affection thereafter. May I always act so as to preserve the finest traditions of my calling, and may I long experience the joy of healing those who seek my help. So let that settle. You don't have to be a doctor to walk in integrity. You don't have to be perfect to do good, but you do have to take responsibility for your presence, your power, and your potential to cause harm or to heal. And that's what this is about. That's what non-malfeasance asks of all of us. If non-malfeasance is don't do harm, beneficence is do some good. It's the proactive side of ethics, actually working in the client's best interest. So think about IOP. It's not enough that somebody shows up and didn't use drugs that week. If they're not working on treatment goals or building recovery capital, we're not fully supporting their wellness. Beneficence means being intentional about supporting somebody's growth, not just avoiding their downfall. And justice is often misunderstood as treat everybody the same, but that's not the point. Treating everybody the same ignores people's different needs. Justice means fairness based on relevant differences. And that might mean giving somebody extra support because they're unhoused, or adjusting expectations if somebody has severe mental health or PTSD symptoms. One of my favorite visuals is this classic cartoon showing equality, inequality, equity, and justice. It starts with this bended tree where everybody gets the same size ladder to be able to reach the tree. Equity is people get what they need to actually be able to reach the tree. And justice is when the tree itself gets evened out so that everybody has equal access. Now, the last one here is fidelity, and it's about loyalty to our clients, to our team, and to our roles. It means keeping our word and protecting the therapeutic relationship. For therapists, it might mean staying consistent and not disappearing and owning our mistakes. But this also applies to peer support, to nursing, to admin. If you say you'll follow up or be in the office, or if you say you'll give somebody an answer, you do it. And that's how we build trust. The minute a client starts to feel that they can't count on us, it's a lot harder to do the real work that they need. So let's talk about what a litmus test is. It comes from chemistry. Litmus papers turn red or blue depending on whether something's an acid or a base. And it's simple, it's fast, and it gives a clear answer. In ethics, we use the term litmus test in the same way. It's a short list of questions you can ask yourself to quickly assess, is this decision okay? Does it hold up to basic moral standards? It's not meant to replace deep ethical reflection or your professional code, but it can help stop you from doing something that's going to cause harm, break trust, or create more problems later. So this next tool is one that I found myself using a lot, and it's called the 4-way test. So think of it like a litmus test, a quick practical way to check on whether something passes the basic threshold of being ethical and responsible. So here's the 4 questions. The first being, is it truth? Not your opinion, not your rationalization, just the plain truth. The next question is it fair to all concerned? And that includes clients, coworkers, and the systems within which we work. The third question is, will it build goodwill and better friendships? If this action damages trust or connection, think again. The fourth question is, will it be beneficial to all those concerned? So does it help, or is it just a convenient or easy fix for you? This test is useful because it works fast. If something you're about to do doesn't pass even one of these, pause. It doesn't mean you have a final answer, but it definitely means more reflection is needed. So now that we've laid the foundation with ethics, principles, and a quick check, like the 4-way test, let's talk about where we're headed for the rest of this training. These are the core areas that we're going to focus on today, not all at once, but step by step. These topics apply across disciplines, whether you're clinical staff, front desk, peer support, medical, or admin. You may not interact with every single topic directly, but being part of a treatment team and treatment center means that we all have shared ethical responsibilities. We'll talk about how to make sure that we're protecting client welfare, honoring confidentiality, navigating dual relationships, understanding our scope of practice, and staying competent. We'll also hit some of the harder to spot stuff, like how our personal values or even the way that we advertise can cross the line. This isn't about memorizing every rule. It's about thinking ethically, recognizing when something's off, and knowing how to slow down and check yourself or ask for help before something becomes a bigger issue. So starting with client welfare, it's one of those phrases that shows up in every single ethics code. And for good reason. It's the why behind almost everything that we do. It means putting the client's best interest first, always. Not our convenience, not our ego, not our need to feel helpful or in control, not the pressure of productivity standards or personal feelings about somebody's behavior. There are two big parts of this concept: dignity and welfare. Dignity means that we offer the humanity of each client, no matter what stage of recovery they're in. We don't shame our clients for relapsing. We don't laugh at their stories. We don't gossip about them, even anonymously. We treat them like whole people with the right to be respected, to make their own choices, and to be met with compassion even when they're hard to be around. Welfare is about protecting their health, safety, and emotional well-being. And that means that we don't ignore warning signs. We don't skip steps with treatment plans. We don't fudge documentation. We don't keep somebody at a level of care that no longer serves them just because it's easier or more profitable. In the state of Pennsylvania, this isn't optional. DDAP requires that all treatment providers operate within the client's welfare as the primary consideration. The state licenses us under the assumption that every person who works at our agency, clinical or not, knows that the client's safety and well-being comes first. If you're in a support role, admin, front desk, peer, nursing, that applies just as much to everything that you do. How you speak to clients, how you manage their records, how you explain a missed appointment or policy, that all communicates whether or not we value their dignity. At JADE, we say we do things differently. One of those differences needs to be how seriously we take client welfare. We don't need a title to protect somebody's dignity. We just need to be decent humans working in alignment with our mission. Now, respecting diversity isn't about being politically correct. It's an ethical responsibility and a clinical one too. In the state of Pennsylvania, DDAP expects all licensed providers to deliver services without discrimination based on race, color, religion, ancestry, national origin, age, sex, gender identity, sexual orientation, disability, or HIV status. And that doesn't just mean on paper, it means in the real world where bias shows up in subtle and systemic ways. And the first part of this is non-discrimination. That means that we don't make decisions about treatment, access, or engagement based on assumptions or stereotypes. We don't judge clients for how they present. We don't judge other people based on what they don't understand. And we definitely don't use humor, language, or body language that shames or marginalizes people. The ethical practice goes deeper than that. It also means respecting differences in how people talk, dress, grieve, cope, love, and define healing. A trauma-informed, culturally respectful place doesn't assume that people experience addiction the same way or want recovery to look the same. And I want to bring in a lens from the Cultural Somatics Institute, which offers this powerful shift. Instead of celebrating or respecting diversity, we're invited to engage with it. And that means practicing active listening, participating in conversations that feel uncomfortable, and remaining open and curious, especially when clients express experiences of oppression, historical trauma, or cultural loss. So yes, it matters how we speak, but it also matters how we listen. Are we interrupting? Are we assuming? Are we centering ourselves? Or are we actually hearing somebody else? Respecting diversity is something we all participate in, not just clinical staff. It affects how the front desk talks to a new client who uses a different name than what's on their ID. It shows up in how we accommodate religious fasting during med administration or offer affirming support to trans clients. And it's reflected in how we respond to microaggressions, even among coworkers. Again, this isn't about perfection, but it's about showing up with humility, curiosity, and a willingness to do better when we know better. And disclosures are a cornerstone of ethical care. They're not just paperwork. We're talking about the conversations that create informed consent. And informed consent means exactly that. A person understands what they're agreeing to, and they have the chance to ask questions or say no. In our setting, disclosures happen when a client starts services, changes levels of care, participates in group, or is referred to another provider. We're ethically and legally obligated to clearly explain what treatment involves, what its limitations are, and what the client can realistically expect. So let's break that down. We need to explain the goals of treatment, but not in our language, in a way that makes sense to the person sitting across from us. We explain the procedures, how sessions are structured, how groups work, how often they'll meet with a nurse or doctor, and what our expectations are. We have to talk about limitations too, and this includes things like, this medication may help reduce cravings, but it won't change your environment or social circle. Or, group therapy can offer support, but it's not a place for deep trauma processing. And of course, we cover potential risks and benefits. Risks could include emotional discomfort, conflict in group, or disclosure fatigue. Benefits could be increased insight, skill development, and community support. A unique risk in our work is confidentiality in group spaces. DDAP and professional ethics codes are clear. We can't guarantee confidentiality in groups. We can only set the expectation. We explain what's shared in group should stay in group, but we acknowledge that others may not follow that, and clients deserve to know that up front. The same goes for peer support. Peers operate with shared experience, but they aren't therapists, and their role needs to be disclosed early to avoid confusion or over-reliance. And one last note, Informed consent is not a one-time event, it's an ongoing dialogue. We revisit it when something changes, when a client looks confused, or when they seem unsure of what they're part of. Respecting a person's right to know what they're signing up for is one of the most humanizing things that we can do. And when a client is receiving care from multiple providers, which is common in substance use disorder and mental health treatment, it's not enough to say we'll coordinate. Ethical coordination requires clear service agreements. These agreements can be formal or informal, but should always clarify who is doing what, how communication will happen, and what each provider's role is. Without this clarity, it's easy for clients to fall through the cracks or worse, get conflicting advice that undermines their care. For example, if a client is getting therapy here at JADE, seeing a psychiatrist in a different agency, and receiving case management through the county, everybody needs to be on the same page. Who's prescribing, who's tracking housing, who's providing therapy, and what modality. We don't want to duplicate services, and we definitely don't give clients mixed messages. Pennsylvania DDAP guidelines and our professional ethics code support integrated care. But care can't be integrated unless it's intentional. That includes written consents, periodic case consults, and defined points of contact across agencies. It's also important that we stay within our lane. A peer support specialist should not be giving therapy. A counselor should not be recommending medical orders. A prescriber should not be commenting on a client's legal goals if they don't have that information. These role boundaries aren't just about scope, they protect the client. And lastly, coordination must respect client autonomy and privacy. Just because we have a signed release of information doesn't mean that we share everything. The information we share must be relevant, necessary, and in the client's best interest. Clear service agreements reduce confusion, promote ethical care, and build trust between agencies, which honestly is what we need more of in this field. And when looking at personal needs and values, this one can get uncomfortable, but it is really essential. We have to talk about how our personal needs and values show up. First, let's talk about actions that meet your needs, not the client's. This includes emotional and financial needs. For example, hugging a client because you need a hug, or telling a client, I love you, because it feels good to hear them say it back, or using a group session to talk about something from your personal life, not because it helps the group, but because you needed to say it out loud. Financially, this can look like offering side services to clients, accepting gifts, or subtly steering somebody towards a referral that benefits you or somebody close to you. It's not always blatant, but if the client's resources are being used to serve your interests in any way, that's an ethical violation. These moments might feel harmless in the moment, but over time they do erode boundaries. They create a dynamic where the client is meeting your needs, and that flips the purpose of the relationship. That's not just clinical either. Peers, admin, front desk, staff can cross the line without realizing it. Sharing too much about your day, your politics, or venting about work while a client is in front of you, those moments shift the focus away from the person that we're here to serve. The second part of this is avoiding the imposition of your values. That includes religion, politics, cultural values, social opinions, anything that can make somebody feel small, judged, or like they don't belong here. Treatment, whether it's therapy, medical care, peer support, or even a check-in at the front desk, should feel like a space where everyone is welcome, regardless of their belief systems. We don't have to agree with our clients, but we do have to create a space where they feel seen, respected, and emotionally safe. And here's a simple litmus test. Am I saying or doing this for their benefit or mine? If it's for you, pause, ask yourself why, and bring it into supervision when you're not sure. That's what it's there for. Now, talking about dual relationships. Dual relationships happen when you have more than one role with a client, and those roles can get tangled. In a perfect world, we'd avoid these completely. But in the kind of tight-knit communities many of us live and work, dual relationships are sometimes unavoidable. The ethical issue isn't just having a dual relationship. It's when that second relationship impairs your judgment and affects how you treat the client or causes harm. So here's some examples. Maybe your hairdresser needs treatment and gets referred to your agency. Or a favorite local musician ends up in your IOP group and you find yourself fangirling a little too hard in group sessions. Or maybe one of your current IOP clients brings their spouse to an event and a few weeks later, that spouse ends up in your OP caseload. So these aren't made up scenarios. They happen and they are complicated. You might feel awkward, flattered, guilty, or pressured to treat them differently. And that's exactly why dual relationships are so risky. They can cloud your ability to stay grounded in your role. When a dual relationship can't be avoided, the ethical response is not to ignore it, it's to seek supervision. Talk to your supervisor or a trusted colleague, document the situation, explore whether a transfer is appropriate or what boundaries need to be in place to protect the client. Most ethics codes and Pennsylvania license standards say avoid them when possible and manage them ethically when you can't. So when in doubt, ask yourself, if this client weren't also my neighbor, hairdresser, coworker, cousin, would I be doing anything differently? And if the answer is yes, it's time to talk about it with somebody that you trust. And moving on to fees for service. So, talking about money can feel a little uncomfortable, but it's part of ethical practice, especially in our field where access to care is often tied to finances. Every client has the right to know what they're being charged, how often, and what's covered or not. This includes copays, deductibles, missed session policies, and what happens if funding changes. There should be no surprises. Ethical billing is transparent billing. And at JADE, we also recognize that people's financial situations vary. We serve a lot of folks in Allegheny County who are uninsured or underinsured. And that's why we have access to some ALDA funding. That's a county-funded program that covers services for residents who meet certain income and access criteria. So when talking about setting fees, we're not just talking about a price tag. We're talking about equitable access. Can the person reasonably afford this? Have we looked at all available resources before turning them away or referring them to another provider? There are also moments when we choose to offer pro bono services, and that might mean writing off a few sessions while a client gets their Medicaid reinstated, or continuing care briefly after funding has lapsed or if it's clinically appropriate. And this isn't about being a martyr, it's about recognizing that sometimes the most ethical choice is to meet someone where they are. That said, any decisions about fee waivers or pro bono care should be supervised and documented. It needs to be a clinical decision, not just a personal one, and it must be applied fairly across all clients, not based on who we like or who we feel bad for. At the end of the day, ethical financial practices protect the client and the agency. They reduce confusion, support trust, and help us stay accountable to our mission. It's also important to name the ethical responsibility that we have around collecting copays and deductibles. When a client uses insurance, they are entering into an agreement not just with us, but with their insurance company. That agreement often includes a shared financial responsibility in the form of a copay or deductible. Ethically, we are obligated to uphold our end of that agreement by collecting those payments consistently and accurately. Waiving copays without proper documentation or oversight can be considered insurance fraud, even if the intention is to help the client. If somebody is truly unable to pay, there are proper steps that we can take, including financial hardship forms and supervisory review, but we can't make those decisions based on convenience, emotion, or favoritism. Fair, consistent billing practices aren't just about money, they are about integrity. Now, moving on to confidentiality, it's going to be one of the most important ethical issues that we navigate. It's one of the most legally complex, especially in substance use disorder and mental health treatment. But first, let's break it down. There's what's legal and there's what's ethical. And they don't always line up. And that's where our judgment, our training, and our supervision come in. So HIPAA protects health information across all medical and mental health settings. But for substance use disorder treatment, we also follow 42 CFR Part 2, which is a federal ruling, which offers stricter protections. It limits what we can and can't share, even with other providers, unless there's written consent or a very specific legal reason. That means you can't talk to a client's spouse, probation officer, or even their psychiatrist unless you have a signed release. Even confirming that somebody is in treatment here is protected under 42 CFR. But then there are legal exceptions, clear and imminent danger to self or others, which includes mandated reporting for child or elder abuse. There's also duty to warn, which comes from the Tarasoff case. And if the client makes a credible threat against somebody else, you are legally obligated to break confidentiality to protect that person. Now, when disclosure is legally allowed or required, ethics still says disclose the minimum amount necessary. We don't need to offer opinions, history, or context unless it's directly relevant. We also have an ethical responsibility to clearly explain the limits of confidentiality to clients at intake and again throughout treatment. They deserve to know what will trigger a report, what stays private, and what might be shared within the treatment team. Now let's talk about something a little more subtle. What happens if you see a client in public? Let's say you're grocery shopping with your partner. A client walks by with somebody you assume is their sister. Do you wave? Do you say hi? Do you pretend you don't know them? Do you bury your nose in the tomatoes and hope that they didn't see you? HIPAA says that you shouldn't acknowledge a client in public without their prior consent. It could be seen as disclosing that they're in treatment. But ethics says that this is a gray area, and the best protection is to have this conversation before it happens. You can ask clients during intake or early report building, hey, if we ever run into each other outside of JADE, how would you like me to handle that? Some clients will say, oh, please say hi. Others will want space. It's also our role to help clients think through the risks and the benefits of their decisions. For example, if a client says, please say hi if you see me at the store, we can gently explore what that might mean for them. What if they're with somebody who doesn't know that they're in treatment? What if it feels different in the moment? What might the impact be if we say hi or if we don't? These aren't questions to scare or persuade, but to support informed choice. Clients have the right to make decisions about how they want to be acknowledged, but those decisions should be thoughtful, not impulsive. Helping them to consider different scenarios is part of how we honor autonomy while upholding confidentiality and protecting their recovery. So the key is planning ahead and checking your own motivations. Are you saying hi because it helps them or because you feel awkward not to? Are you avoiding them because you are afraid of making a mistake? Or is it because that's what they asked for? These are all very small choices, but they speak volumes about how we hold boundaries, protect trust, and honor your client's privacy in and out of the office. I'm now talking about informed consent. It's more than just a signature on a form. It's a conversation, and it's one that needs to happen early, clearly, and often. We start by explaining the nature and purpose of treatment, and that means telling the client about the services that we offer, what they can expect from counseling, group, or medications, and how we'll work together towards their goal. Then we talk about the risks and the benefits, not just the good stuff, but they need to know that therapy can bring up painful emotions, that groups can feel vulnerable, and that medication may come with side effects. And if there are alternatives, including declining services or seeking care elsewhere, we include that too. Informed consent also includes agency policies and procedures. And that means things like attendance expectations, financial agreements, how to file a grievance, what happens if they miss too many groups, or what to expect during a discharge or a transfer. These aren't just logistics, they help shape the client's experience and must be discussed clearly. Finally, we revisit confidentiality, what it covers, where the limits are. Clients need to know from the start that there are exceptions like mandated reporting or duty to warn, and what we're legally required to do in those cases. And here's the part that people sometimes forget. Informed consent is ongoing. If something changes in treatment, in policy, or in a client's understanding, we revisit the conversation. We don't assume that just because they signed something once, that they still fully understand what's happening. Everyone at JADE plays a role in supporting informed consent. Admin staff explains policies, helps grab signatures, medical staff can explain treatment risks, counselors explain goals, peers clarify boundaries. When we all do our part, we create a culture where clients feel empowered and not confused. And that's one of the best protections that we can offer. Now we're moving on to a larger section here, which is talking about the ethics of electronics, risks, and guidelines. And in this, we're also going to talk about the ethics of AI use. So just buckle up with me for a second. So in this, we're talking about email, text, cloud platforms, AI, and messaging tools. And this all feels really fast and easy, but they do come with a risk. One of the best ways to understand the difference between a phone call and an email is this. Sending an email is like sending a postcard, not a sealed envelope. Technically, no one is supposed to read it, but it passes through multiple servers, inboxes, and devices before it gets to the person that you meant it for. HIPAA does allow us to communicate with clients electronically, but only with reasonable safeguards. And that includes double checking that you're sending to the right email address, not including other clients' names or information by mistake, and limiting how much information you include in a message. So you could say, hey, let's talk in session, instead of writing a whole clinical summary to the client. Clients can give written permission to receive email, text, or even automated phone calls through third-party systems, but that doesn't mean that we ignore security. And yes, clients can start the email chain. If they reach out to you, that doesn't mean all confidentiality or boundary rules go out the window. We still need to respond using best practices and copy that message into their chart so it's documented. If you're using email or any digital platform to talk to the client, we need to have solid boundaries and procedures. So start by setting clear expectations. What's your turnaround time for emails? 24 hours? 48 hours? Do you answer over the weekend or late at night? If your client sends you something marked as urgent at 3 p.m. on a Friday, do they know that you may not see it until Monday? Tell your clients what to expect and stick to it. This is part of maintaining professional boundaries and client safety. Keep message content simple and appropriate. If a client tries to process trauma in an email or text, gently redirect. Hey, this is something I want to talk about with you in person. In crisis, email should never be a primary tool. Clients need to know that email isn't monitored 24/7. Include this in your consent conversation. And remember the rule. If it's not documented, it didn't happen. Copy client communications into a contact note in their chart. And use secure networks. Don't log into CareLogic or check emails from coffee shop Wi-Fi. And make sure that your phone or laptop is password protected and locked when you're not using it. Finally, the best practice is to use encrypted systems for any sensitive communication. There are a lot of trainings out there on the ethics of virtual care. If you're doing telehealth, texting with clients, or even using cloud-based forms, it's time to get trained. At JADE, we want to be accessible, but we also want to be responsible. Just because something is easy doesn't mean it's ethical. Electronic communication is convenient, but protecting our client is always more important than convenience. Now, moving on to AI in mental health and addiction treatment. AI, or artificial intelligence, is showing up more and more in the world of mental health and addiction treatment, whether it's using predictive analytics to flag high-risk clients, documentation support tools like ChatGPT, or automated appointment reminders. These tools are meant to assist, not replace our judgment. At JADE, we're beginning to see these tools in subtle ways. Speech to text, documentation review, and yes, this training was even drafted with some help using an AI assistant. But we have to be honest. With this power comes great responsibility. Ethical AI use is based on 4 key principles. Fairness. Don't use tools that reinforce bias or discrimination. Transparency. Know how the AI works and how it reaches its conclusions. Accountability. If AI gives you a suggestion, you're still responsible for what you do with it. And harm reduction. If a tool is likely to cause harm or even confusion, we pause or we stop using it. And AI tools like ChatGPT can feel helpful for writing letters, clarifying documentation language, or summarizing dense policies. But here's the line. Do not include identifiable client information in any AI tool, platform, or chatbot. Even if the tool says it doesn't store data, your device, browser, or cloud backup might. If you're using AI to support any part of your work, say summarizing case notes or drafting a letter, you must first anonymize the data. No names, no initials, no dates of birth, no exact treatment details that could identify someone. And ethically, if we're using AI as part of client care, for example, using AI-generated tools as a psychoeducational group or applying predictive tools in program planning, we should be explaining that to clients. Just like with informed consent, they have the right to know how decisions that affect them are being made. Also remember, any AI-related conversation about a client must be documented. Even if it was just a tool that you used to help phrase something, it's part of the record. One of the biggest ethical concerns in using AI is bias. If an AI tool is trained on data that reflects racial, gender, or socioeconomic discrimination, it will likely repeat those patterns, often invisibly. For example, imagine a risk assessment tool that uses zip code as a variable. That might seem harmless, but it's often a stand-in for race or poverty that creates inequity. A client from Homewood might get flagged as a higher risk based on community data, not individual behavior, and that's not fair or ethical. That's why your judgment matters more than data. AI might suggest one thing, but you know your client. You know their history, nuance, and change, and you are responsible for the decisions, not the tool. The best practice is to treat AI like an assistant, not a decision maker. It can offer ideas or save time, but it doesn't understand context, trauma, grief, identity, or what it's like to try to get sober in real life. So if a tool flagged your client as at risk, but your gut told you otherwise, what would you do? Who would you talk to? How would you document that decision? So let's just close this section with some specifics about how JADE does and doesn't use AI. First, AI tools like ChatGPT can be used internally for drafting and brainstorming. Think progress note templates, referral letters, or flyers. But here's the non-negotiable line. Never put any identifiable client data in there. That includes names, date of births, diagnoses, or situations specific enough that a person could recognize themselves if they were reading what you wrote. Clinical staff may use AI to help brainstorm language or structure, but not for decision-making or documentation involving PHI. AI can help us write better, but it can't replace our clinical reasoning. Outreach or education materials? Totally fine to use AI to help create those as long as a human reviews and approves anything public-facing. This goes for admin, front desk, and marketing. So just keep in mind, just because a sentence sounds polished doesn't mean it's clinically appropriate. And clients may also use AI on their own. So for example, sharing a journal entry that they wrote with help from a chatbot. In that case, validate their creativity, use it as a starting point, and bring the conversation back to relational processing. Just because something feels insightful on the page doesn't mean that it's been emotionally integrated. And even if your tool says it doesn't remember, your browser, cloud service, or shared device might. Your AI use creates a digital footprint. So don't assume something is safe just because it's technically anonymous. And when we really think about it, nothing on the internet is truly ever anonymous. We're working towards including client-facing transparency language too. You may start seeing lines like this in our intake forms. Your therapist may use secure AI-assisted tools for grammar or structure. No identifiable information will ever be entered into these tools. Finally, and most importantly, JADE's policy is this. JADE currently allows the use of AI tools such as ChatGPT only for internal support tasks like drafting or idea generation. AI is not to be used for clinical decision-making or documentation involving client PHI. If you're unsure, that's okay. Ethics is about asking, pausing, checking in, not pretending to know everything, and when in doubt, don't guess, ask your supervisor. So let's talk about self-disclosure, both in the session and out in the world, and especially online. Even when we set clear boundaries around what we share with clients, the internet can bypass those boundaries quickly. Clients might Google us, look up our old posts, find our private Instagram, or stumble across a public TikTok that we made 5 years ago. So here's a good place to start. Google yourself. Log out of Facebook or Instagram and see what others can see. Practice removing anything that you wouldn't openly share in session with a client. That doesn't mean that you need to be invisible, but it does mean being intentional. Look at geotags too. Photos and posts can reveal where you live, where you work out, or where you regularly spend time, even if you never share your address directly. And it's not just social media. Self-disclosure also includes what we say in sessions or how we respond when a client asks personal questions. Before sharing something about yourself, ask, is it for me or is it for them? How will this shift the therapeutic dynamic? And am I modeling vulnerability or making the session about myself? Self-disclosure should always serve a clinical or relational benefit, not emotional relief for the staff member. Now, what about social media boundaries with clients? Friending clients on Facebook or Instagram is not appropriate, even if your account is private. LinkedIn connections can feel a little bit more neutral, but they're still risky. Clients could view your network, see your activity, or message you outside of your professional role. JADE's general guidance is this: don't engage with clients on a personal social media platform. If there's a need for digital connection, like group chat access or appointment reminders, it should go through secure and designated platforms. Before posting online, ask yourself, would I say this out loud in a crowded elevator full of strangers? If not, don't post it. Could this disclosure negatively impact a client or coworker? Could this affect how I'm perceived as a professional? And am I representing JADE and our values? On the flip side, what about looking up our clients, finding their social media, reading their court dockets, or Googling their names? Most ethical guidelines recommend not searching clients unless you have a clear clinical reason and ideally you've discussed it with the client. When we do our own digging, we risk taking away the client's control over their narrative. And in many cases, their perspective is more important than the facts. So you can pause and reflect here. Would you feel comfortable knowing a client had searched for you online? What would you hope that they did with what they found? How can you offer that same respect in return? Moving on to language. So let's talk about something that we all do. We write texts, we send emails, we message each other in CareLogic through our client portals, and yet we rarely stop and think, how is my tone coming across in my writing? Most research shows that 80 to 90% of communication is nonverbal. That means that tone of voice, body language, eye contact, even posture, these things give context to our words. And that's why in-person or video sessions are often required in mental health and substance use disorder treatment. We need to see and hear the client and vice versa. But when we're writing, whether it's to a client, a coworker, or a referral source, we lose all of that nonverbal scaffolding. And that's where things can go a little sideways. So let's look at a few tone examples. Say a client sends you an email asking if they missed group. Your responses could read very differently based on tone. Yes, you missed it. Could come off cold or punitive. Or you could say, yes, you did. Are you okay? That's more empathetic. And then another option still would be, yes, and I'll be updating your attendance in the chart. That sounds formal or bureaucratic. Even something like, please call me versus, hey, when you get a chance, can you give me a quick call? I just want to check in. The first one can sound like somebody's in trouble. The second feels supportive. This isn't just about client communication either. Think about how we email each other. A quick okay from a supervisor can read as dismissive. A text without punctuation can read as cold. And saying we need to talk with no context, that sends most people into anxiety mode. So what do we do about it? Slow down, reread your message before you send them, especially to clients. If something could be misread, try to add some warmth or clarity, maybe throw an emoji in there. And when in doubt, pick up the phone or schedule a face-to-face conversation. And if you're on the receiving end of a message that feels off, unclear, or upsetting, pause before reacting. Ask yourself, could this have been a rushed message? Could tone be getting lost in translation? If it feels safe, ask for clarification rather than assuming intent. You might say, hey, I got your message. I just wanted to make sure that I understood what you meant. Giving each other the benefit of the doubt helps preserve trust and keep small misunderstandings from snowballing into conflict. Communication is a two-way street, and professionalism means showing up with curiosity, not reaction. So miscommunication doesn't just create confusion. It can damage rapport, rupture trust, or escalate a situation that didn't need to be escalated. That makes it an ethical concern, not just a communication hiccup. So you can stop and pause and reflect here. Have you ever received a message from a coworker or client that made you feel anxious or misunderstood, only to find out it wasn't meant that way at all? What could have helped? How might your own written tone be received by someone in crisis or early recovery? Now moving on to record. Whether you're clinical, medical, peer support, or admin, you play a role in keeping client records accurate, timely, and confidential. Documentation isn't just a paperwork task, it's an ethical responsibility. It shows what happened, what we did about it, and how we're supporting the client's recovery. At JADE, we maintain records according to DDAP, HIPAA, 42 CFR Part 2, and internal policies. That includes treatment plans, progress notes, encounter forms, attendance logs, phone calls, emails, anything related to client care. All records are confidential. That means no printing client info at home, no screenshots, no texting clinical info, and no CareLogic pulled up on public Wi-Fi. Keeping clean records protects you, your clients, and the agency. When in doubt, document it. When you're not sure how much to say, ask your supervisor. And let's talk about professional competence and where enthusiasm sometimes outpaces ethics. Just because you're excited about a model like IFS or EMDR doesn't mean you're ready to use it in practice. The ethical standard is clear. We only practice within the boundaries of our education, training, and supervised experience. A master's degree in counseling, social work, or psychology gives you a broad foundation, but it's just that, a foundation. It doesn't mean that you're qualified to lead a trauma group or provide couples therapy unless you've been trained and supervised in those areas. Here's a common situation. A clinician watches a webinar in IFS and starts introducing parts work in group. It's well-intentioned, but without full training, it risks harm, misrepresentation, and client confusion. At JADE, we support growth, and we also expect that you pursue formal training and consultation before integrating new techniques. Whether it's art therapy, DBT, or trauma-informed care, you build competence through education, experience, and supervision, not just interest or exposure. So you can stop here and think about one area of practice that you're curious about, but maybe not yet fully trained in. Who could support you in building that skill ethically? So advertising isn't just about what we put on billboards or business cards. It includes how we write our bios, how we talk about our services on the website, and even how we describe ourselves on LinkedIn or social media. At JADE, we strive to be clear, honest, and transparent in how we present ourselves. That means no exaggeration, no creative stretching. For example, we wouldn't say, all of our therapists are independently licensed, because that's not true. We also have pre-licensed and associate-level clinicians who are under supervision. That doesn't make them less capable, but it does mean that we have to describe their credentials accurately. What can we say confidently? That we are a state-licensed treatment center through the Pennsylvania Department of Drug and Alcohol Programs, aka DDAP. We're also accredited with the Commission on Accreditation of Rehabilitation Facilities, which is CARF. That's a serious credential and one that speaks to the quality of care and compliance. And because of those two things, I can make a slide in our slide deck that looks like this, with our logo and the logos of the governing bodies I just mentioned. We also expect staff to be honest in personal and professional bios. If you're an MSW working under supervision, don't write therapist specializing in trauma and addiction without also clarifying your status in supervision. This goes for Psychology Today, Therapy Den, LinkedIn, or any place that you market yourself. Misrepresentation can lead to confusion, mistrust, or even licensing board complaints. But beyond that, it just doesn't align with who we are. So think about this. If somebody read your staff bio or a JADE flyer about you and then came into treatment, would their experience match their expectations? If not, how could we tighten that message to make it more accurate and based in reality? Next up, let's talk about professional credentials, not just earning them, but representing them ethically. And here's the big rule. You can't say you're licensed until the state officially says so. So that means if you've applied for your LPC or LCSW, that is great. But until you get the actual license number or approval letter, you cannot put LPC or LCSW after your name. This matters everywhere where your name appears. Emails, documentation, bio blurbs, flyers, business cards. Even if your test is passed and your paperwork is in, it's not official until it's official. And the same goes for other credentials. From the NBCC, the NASW, the Art Therapies Credential Board, DDAP, etc. They all have clear rules on when and how their designations can be used. These aren't just technicalities, they are ethical obligations to prevent misleading others about your qualifications. At JADE, we've had to navigate this carefully. For example, we are proud to offer art therapy as a treatment modality, but only when we have board-certified art therapists on staff. If that credential isn't present, we don't call it art therapy. Instead, we might say something like, we incorporate creative expression and art making into therapy. It's still honest and still celebrates what we do, but it doesn't cross an ethical line of using a designation when that person with the designation isn't present. The same principle applies to claiming specialties like EMDR, DBT, CBT, IFS, or trauma-informed therapy. If you haven't been officially trained and certified, don't list it. Not in your bio, not in your email signature, not in your sessions. Now, what about how to list credentials once you have them? There's a standard order that professionals use to make things clear. So your academic degrees will go first. So that could be an MA, an MS, an MSW, a PhD. Next up is your licenses, LPC, LCSW, RN. Then you're going to do state designations or advanced titles. After that, certifications, ATRBC, NCC, and then any other relevant trainings or credentials. So I put my signature down at the bottom for you as an example. Got Jen Ackerson, MA, LPC, ACS, ATRBC, ATCS. I am collecting all of the alphabet letters after my name. But right now, all of that mumbo jumbo essentially means I'm a master's level therapist that's state licensed in Pennsylvania as a licensed professional counselor. I have a credential as an approved clinical supervisor. I'm also a board certified art therapist, and I'm an art therapist credentialed supervisor. Now, I'm also a doctoral candidate, and hopefully soon I will have my PhD. But until then, MA will stay after my name. On the date that I defend my dissertation and ideally get the doctorate, I'll swap out the MA for the PhD. If you're pre-licensed, your signature might look like your name, comma, MA. That's ethical, it's transparent, it shows clients and coworkers exactly where you are in your process, and it helps protect everyone. And as professionals working in behavioral health, especially at a state licensed agency like JADE, we carry responsibility not just to our clients, but to the public trust. That starts with non discrimination. Every client, coworker, family member, or visitor deserves to be treated with dignity and respect, regardless of race, gender, sexual orientation, disability, housing status, background, or legal history, among others. And that expectation applies whether you're clinical billing, front desk, or peer support. Let's pause for a moment here, clearly talk about sexual harassment, because it's not just the obvious stuff. Yes, of course, direct sexual comments, jokes, gestures, or messages are unacceptable. That's a given. But sexual harassment can also be subtle things like offhand sexual innuendos, joking references to body parts, drawings of penises, or sexual imagery on whiteboards or paperwork, even if it's just for fun. This kind of behavior is still unprofessional, inappropriate, and ethically out of bounds, especially in client-facing spaces. So think about who we serve. Clients with trauma histories, clients who've had their boundaries crossed, clients who are in early recovery trying to feel safe, clients with histories of sexual abuse, and clients navigating trust and vulnerability. Even if you think something is just a joke, it might land very differently for somebody else, and our offices are supposed to be safe. That's part of beneficence, or doing good, and non-malfeasance, doing no harm. A joke that makes a client feel unsafe, objectified, or disrespected, that's harm, even if your intention was something different. So the bottom line is, if it wouldn't belong in a trauma-informed care space, and a lot of this doesn't, then it doesn't belong in our space. We are here to model safety and respect, not to erode it. Maintaining safety and professionalism within our walls is just one part of the picture. How we represent ourselves outside of our office matters just as much. When we're communicating with third parties like probation, CYF, schools, or other providers, we are expected to be honest and accurate. That means no assumptions, no opinions disguised as facts, no exaggerations, even if we think they help. If something isn't documented or clinically supported, don't say it, don't write it, period. And the same standard applies to media presentations. If you're giving a talk, being interviewed, posting publicly, or just speaking as somebody who works at JADE, remember your words represent you and the agency. Be clear about your role, use disclaimers if needed, and always stay aligned within the mission. And speaking of representing the agency, let's talk about JADE branded clothing. If you're out in public wearing a hoodie or a shirt with our logo, consider yourself an ambassador. When you're at the grocery store, a recovery event, or yes, even a bar, you are representing our mission. And our mission is to heal one's mind, body, and spirit through high-quality, evidence-based care for people living with addiction, rooted in dignity, respect, compassion, and honesty. So maybe don't get blackout drunk in a JADE sweatshirt while stumbling and swearing at strangers. And honestly, even if you're not in branded clothing, just don't be an asshole in public. You still represent our field. You still represent recovery. We all have bad days, but how we show up in the world matters. Public trust is fragile. When we're writing a letter, making a referral, or ordering a beer, how can we carry ourselves to reflect the mission and the values that we stand for? And being ethical doesn't stop at how we treat clients. It extends to how we treat each other, especially other professionals in our field. At JADE, we work alongside people from many disciplines: LPCs, LCSWs, medical staff, peer support specialists, case managers, prescribers. We also refer out to therapists who use a wide range of approaches. That means we won't always agree, but we must always stay respectful. And that means don't dismiss another person's approach just because it's different from yours. Don't badmouth other providers to clients. Don't make personal attacks on social media, even if you're posting on your personal account. If you see something that's unethical or concerning, report it through the proper channels, not through gossip or public posts. And remember, anytime you speak about your work, whether it's in person, online, or on a panel, you're representing your profession and your values. Be confident, be respectful, and stay aligned with what you know to be ethical. I want to talk a bit about ethics in group therapy. So as we know, group therapy is a cornerstone of treatment at JADE, and it's also a space where ethical issues show up in really unique ways. That's where we can look at some ethical guidelines and codes from group therapists. There's the American Group Psychotherapy Association, and also the International Board for Certification of Group Psychotherapists. They both have ethics codes that are really great jumping off places if you have any group-related ethics questions. But they're also both highlighting the responsibility to the individual client and the group as a whole, which is, I think, an interesting shift from what we've been talking about so far. So the first step with good ethics in group is screening. Every client must be assessed for group appropriateness based on their clinical presentation, behavioral stability, and level of care. Someone actively psychotic, in withdrawal, highly disruptive, or unable to manage distress without externalizing may not be safe or feel safe in a group setting. And that's not a judgment of worth, it's a clinical and ethical decision. And that's why it's essential that the group therapist, not just the intake staff, has a clear understanding of who's being referred to their group. Screening isn't a one-time event either. We continue assessing fit throughout treatment. So the ethical recommendation here is that as soon as you see intake staff add somebody to your group, call that new client, introduce yourself, schedule an individual even before they're scheduled to attend their first group. You do your assessment to make sure that they're going to be a good fit into your group, or help validate or introduce some group rules to help them norm into the group on their first day. We also have a responsibility to ensure the emotional and physical safety within the group. That means setting expectations clearly, naming behaviors that are unacceptable, like verbal aggression, boundary violations, or triggering disclosures, and maintaining a group structure that protects all participants. A really great way to do this is to make sure that all group members are using I statements in their language with group. Now, the confidentiality of group is a shared responsibility. At JADE, we tell clients everything in here stays in here, but we can't guarantee that others will follow that rule. So only share what you're ready to have known. It's also on us as group leaders to know our stuff. Ethics around groups, say it clearly. Group facilitators have a personal responsibility to stay competent. Group work isn't just individual therapy with more people in the room. It has its own structure, dynamics, and pacing, and we must train accordingly. Finally, we never use the group or our role as a facilitator to meet personal needs or promote personal views. No venting, no over-disclosure, no political or spiritual persuasion. And moving on to termination and referral, those are both also ethical responsibilities, not just paperwork tasks. So let's start with the big one. Abandonment is prohibited. That means that we don't just stop seeing somebody or ghost them because they missed too many sessions or were difficult to work with. We always communicate what's happening, offer referrals, and give them the chance to understand and respond. Now, if we discover that a client isn't a good fit for JADE or for our specific program or provider, we're still obligated to help them find care that is appropriate. That could mean a higher or lower level of care like PHP, inpatient or outpatient, a different program within JADE, a referral out to a specialist such as a trauma treatment or maybe psychiatrist, or even letting them know that they don't meet criteria for substance use disorder treatment or mental health treatment right now. And that last one's important. If a person doesn't meet ASAM or DSM-5 criteria, it's unethical and illegal to admit them into treatment just to fill a slot. Think of it like this. If somebody walked into the ER with a broken leg, and while splinting it, the staff decided to go ahead and just schedule them for an open heart surgery just in case, without doing any labs or tests, like that wouldn't just be weird, it would be fraud. So in the same way, admitting somebody into treatment when there's no diagnosis, no need, and no plan is fraud, waste, and abuse, and it puts the client and the agency at risk. At JADE, termination is never a punishment, it's part of ethical care. When we're no longer the best option for somebody, we help them get to where they need to go. It's not a failure, it's just good clinical judgment. And our ethical responsibility includes how we relate to our employer and the workplace as a whole. At JADE, that means maintaining professionalism, clarity, and accountability in both directions, staff to agency and agency to staff. From day one, you're given a job description that defines your role, and we revisit that if your role shifts, whether you're promoted, reassigned, or expand your focus. These expectations are reflected in your job offer or contract and are supported through weekly supervision and yearly performance evaluations. We also offer in-house training like the one that you're watching right now to support your development and to keep you up to date on ethics, documentation, supervision, and best practices in care. During yearly reviews and in supervision, we talk about goals. JADE wants your professional goals to matter here. Whether you're aiming for licensure, learning a new clinical model, or growing into leadership, we want to know and to help you. You're also welcome to bring that up anytime, not just at review time. And because this is an ethical topic and we need to say it clearly, JADE does not tolerate discrimination or exploitive relationships. That includes hiring practices, compensation, and expectations of labor. For example, we run an unpaid internship program that is structured, supervised, and focused on student learning. This is not exploitative. It's an educational model based on state and credentialing board expectations. We provide clinical training, supervision, and experience in exchange for intern hours, and we support their transition into paid roles when possible. For paid staff, we compensate you for the work that you do, and we've added a bonus structure to recognize those going above and beyond. Your time matters. We also do regular market research and aim to beat what other local agencies are offering for similar levels of care or structured services. Are there agencies that pay more? Yes. Will the work look different there? Also yes. Higher pay often comes with a heavier caseload, longer hours, less flexibility, and sometimes a culture that just doesn't match your values. The grass might look greener, but sometimes it's just AstroTurf. Because we're state licensed, CARF accredited, and Medicaid friendly, we take on extra labor to meet those standards. But a lot of that looks like documentation. It's not always glamorous, but it is part of our commitment to providing ethical, high-quality, person-centered care. It's also a non-negotiable piece of the job. That said, we do our best to reflect that in how we structure your schedule, with a balance between client-facing time and dedicated hours for documentation so that you are not set up to drown. We also know that this is a high burnout field. Substance use disorder treatment is hard. The emotional labor is real, and sometimes folks realize that this isn't part of their long-term path, and that's okay. Sometimes we hire wrong. Sometimes people just take the job for a paycheck. But if you're here because you care, because you want to do the work, because the mission matters to you, we want to help you stay. Really. If you're ever feeling unsure or weighing the pros and cons of leaving versus staying, come talk to us. You will not get a guilt trip. We want you to land where you can thrive. And if that's here, we'll do our best to make it work for you. And if that's not, we'll support you in your next step. The bottom line, we don't expect you to be a robot or a martyr. We expect you to be human, professional, and communicative. We care about the people who care about this work. So let's keep talking and let's keep building a place worth staying for. Now, before we move on to the next section, I want to pause and name a few things that might not have been called out directly yet, but they are really important. First, supervision is an ethical tool. Ethical practice doesn't mean that you always know the right answer in the moment. It means that you know when to ask. If something feels off, if you're unsure about how to respond to a client, or if you're sitting with a decision that's weighing on you, bring it to supervision. It's not a weakness, it's the job, and we expect that here. Second, we need to name the role of power and boundaries, especially in a place like JADE, where we're working with folks who are vulnerable, newly sober, or figuring out who they can trust. Every one of us holds some kind of power, whether you're running group, driving a van, handling client files, or answering phones at the front desk, and that power comes with responsibility. That means avoiding over-identifying, staying out of client dynamics, and holding clean professional boundaries even when you feel like you really get it. And just to be clear, there are some gray zones that come up a lot, so let's name them. Don't check in with clients through personal social media. Don't talk about one client to another client, even casually. Don't hang out with former clients too soon after discharge. It's not about being mean, it's just about safety and trust. And finally, I want to say this really plainly. At JADE, ethics isn't just about avoiding bad behavior. It's about doing the right thing, the clear thing, the kind thing, even when it's inconvenient. We don't expect perfection, but we do expect accountability, honesty, and integrity. We want this to be a place where ethical conversations are welcome, where you can say, I'm not sure, or this feels off, or can we talk through this? That's the kind of culture that we're building, one that people don't feel afraid to ask. Now, looking at when you are in an ethical decision-making process, there's some tools to help you think it through. And ethical challenges are rarely black and white. They don't come with neon signs saying, this is an ethical violation. They show up in messy moments, complicated decisions, and sometimes in the in-between of policies and human needs. And that's where we need a framework. One of the clearest that we use is the 8-step ethical decision-making model. Step 1 is to identify the problem. What exactly is going on here? Step 2 is to apply your code of ethics, ACA, ADA, ASWAB. What guidance is already written in your discipline's rules? 3, determine the nature and dimensions of the dilemma. Who is impacted and how? 4, generate possible courses of action. Lay out all your options. What do the codes say? What are the policies? 5, consider the consequences, not just legally, but morally. Think about JADE's mission, your profession's values, and your own personal integrity. 6, evaluate the best course of action. Does this hold up under scrutiny? 7, implement. Take the next ethical step. And 8 is to review the outcome. Did it work? Did it create new concerns? Start back at step 1 if needed. And to help make that process a little bit more dynamic, we often borrow from the Disney creative strategy, a thinking model built out by Walt Disney and expanded on by Robert Dilts. And it uses 4 roles in a set sequence to explore any complex challenge. So first, become the outsider. Get analytical. Take a step back. Look at it from the outside. What's really happening here? Then shift into the role of dreamer. Go big. Be imaginative. What is the best case scenario that you can think of? What would this look like if you could do anything? Next, step into realist. Get practical. What can we actually do with the resources that we have? What steps are realistic? Finally, become the critic. Play devil's advocate. What could go wrong? What are the blind spots? What's missing? And this model works really well in team supervision or personal reflection. It slows you down. It helps you think beyond urgency or panic and opens up more thoughtful, values-based responses. And you can also try De Bono's 6 thinking hats. It's a really similar tool that breaks thinking down into 6 hats: logic, emotion, optimism, caution, creativity, and process, used in any order depending on the need. Some teams really love that flexibility. Others like the Disney's clear progression. It's okay to be off task as long as you are on purpose. Whether you're working through something hard, ethics may feel like a detour, but in truth, it's the path. Ethics is the work. If you slow down, reflect, consult, and stay connected to values, you're doing it right. So there's an optional part right here where you can pause and reflect, where you can think about a time that you've had to make a tough call. Which hat or Disney role did you usually lead with? Dreamer, realist, critic, or outsider? Which one do you tend to skip over, or which one might be really hard for you? Is there a peer or a staff member that can help you put on that hat or play that role for you? Now, I introduced the four-way test at the beginning of this training as an ethical litmus test. It's simple, memorable, and powerful. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all those concerned? But sometimes ethics isn't about a clear yes or no. Sometimes it's about pausing and asking the right gut check questions, the kind that bring you back to your values, your judgment, and your responsibility. And that's where litmus tests come in. These are questions that can help yourself in the moment to see if something feels off or to help guide you back to clarity. So you can ask yourself, would it be okay if this happened to my mom, my partner, or my best friend? Would I be comfortable if this decision showed up on the front page of the paper tomorrow morning with my name on it? Does this decision align with my core values and the kind of professional that I want to be remembered as? And I think some of the most powerful questions are, would I treat every client the same way in this situation? Or would I recommend the same course of action to a colleague or a supervisee? And you can consider that you're probably on ethical ground if you've been honest in both your thinking and your actions. The action is clearly in the best interest of the client. You're not acting out of malice, reactivity, or personal gain. And your actions reflect solid clinical reasoning and current best practices in the field. And one last favorite is that crowded elevator rule. So if you wouldn't say it out loud in a full elevator of strangers, don't post it online or say it to a client. These aren't legal standards, they're human standards. They keep you aligned when things get messy, and they give you something to hold onto when policies aren't enough. And they remind you that sometimes the clearest compass that you have is your integrity. Now, alongside ethics comes professionalism. And while that might bring to mind basics like dress code or showing up on time, it runs much deeper than that. Professionalism is how we show up every day, how we carry ourselves, how we speak to and about others, and how we contribute to a workplace that's safe, respectful, and grounded in care. It includes our bedside manner, how we speak to clients, how we engage with family members, whether or not they have a signed release, and how we interact with one another regardless of role. That means everyone. Supervisors, interns, peer staff, admin, clinicians, we all deserve to be treated with respect and clarity. Professionalism also includes tone and candor. Are we able to bring both compassion and directness to a conversation? Do we know how to set boundaries without shaming or blaming? Do we communicate concerns clearly and respectfully? Or do we passive-aggressively vent about coworkers or clients where others can hear us? Let's be honest. This shows up in a lot of subtle and not so subtle ways. You might hear somebody venting in the hallway about how ridiculous the client is being. You might catch yourself rolling your eyes or sharing a joke that punches down, not up. Maybe you find yourself telling another client how hard someone in group is being. If a client can hear you talking about another client, it's already gone too far. That's not venting, that's harm. And let's push a little deeper. If you catch yourself bitching about a client, ask yourself, what's happening in me that's making me act this way? Not what's wrong with them. Clients can be frustrating, so can this job. But if you're regularly finding yourself mocking, demeaning, or judging the people that we're here to serve, it's time to pause and check in with yourself. We're here to serve. If we're not serving, what are we doing here? That doesn't mean that we don't have to have boundaries. That doesn't mean that we don't have boundaries. It doesn't mean that we don't hold clients responsible or express our honest feelings in supervision. But it does mean that we do it in a way that's professional, kind, and respectful, even when we're tired or stressed. You might be the only safe person a client has that day. Make it count. And I want to take a moment to revisit an especially important area of professionalism, client confidentiality and access to charts. While we function as a treatment team, accessing clients' records is still bound by ethical and legal standards. HIPAA, 42 CFR Part 2, DDAP, and JADE policy all emphasize the principle of need to know. And that means unless it's necessary for your job, you don't open the chart. So let's break it down into some examples. So let's say that you heard that Justin Bieber is a client here. Calm down, he's not. But you're curious. So you look up his notes, even though he's not your client. That's a breach of confidentiality. It doesn't matter if you're a clinician, admin, or peer. Curiosity is not clinical need. My second example is about casual familiarity. So maybe you're a support staff and you see a client in the waiting room. One day you wonder how their session went and you pull up their DAP note to read it. Unless it directly affects your job, billing, scheduling, med coordination, it's out of bounds. My third example is about a client in your IOP group mentioned something concerning about somebody in another therapist's OP group. You want the full picture, so you open the person's chart. Unless you're on their treatment team, that's not your chart to access. A client bringing up somebody else does not give you permission. So when is it okay? If you're the therapist, prescriber, or supervisor assigned to the client, if you're billing or scheduling and need to verify service details, or if you're involved in med refills and need last prescription dates, then yes, access only the parts needed and document your activity. And know this, our system tracks all access. There's an audit trail. Every click, every chart, every note. If somebody's opening files outside of their scope, it's traceable and it's grounds for corrective action. So when in doubt, ask, check with your supervisor, but ultimately protect client trust. And a few more professionalism reminders as we wrap up this section. Keep workplace conversations client-centered and respectful. Don't gossip or vent where others can hear. Avoid sharing anything about JADE clients or operations on social media. Even vague or anonymized posts can cross the line. Respect your colleagues' time and roles. Don't expect admin staff to make clinical calls or clinicians to field front desk complaints. And as always, remember, professionalism is how we model recovery, safety, and respect. It's part of the treatment that we offer. So before we close out this section, let's just recap a few reminders about professionalism. These aren't just workplace niceties, they're foundational to how we protect clients, support each other, and keep this place running with integrity. So first, follow through matters. Documenting on time, responding to emails, following through with what you say, these may seem small, but they're huge when it comes to trust. When we're behind on notes or drop tasks without communication, it adds stress to the system and affects client care. It's not enough to be good in session. Professionalism includes being reliable. Second, manage your own reactions. We all bring personal stuff to the job, our stories, our biases, our stress. But professionalism means knowing where to take it. If you're activated or emotionally drained, that belongs in supervision or even in your personal counseling, not in a session and not in the break room. Bring your full self to work doesn't mean unloading it on others. Third, remember that you're modeling something, especially in substance use disorder treatment. Clients are watching how we show up. When we stay calm, direct, and respectful under pressure, we're showing what recovery can look like. Sometimes your professionalism teaches more than any curriculum or worksheet ever could. And lastly, respect every role. We come from different disciplines, medical, clinical, peer, admin, but we're all working towards the same goal. Treat every contribution like it matters, because it does. And that's what professionalism means here at JADE. It's how we protect each other, support our clients, and make sure that this is a workplace that we're proud of. If you take one thing away from this training, let it be this. Ethics isn't just a checklist. It's a living, breathing part of how we treat people, our clients, our coworkers, and ourselves. It shows up in the tone of your voice, the boundaries that you hold, the questions you ask, and the decisions that you make when nobody's watching. None of us get it right all the time. This isn't about being perfect. It's about being honest, reflective, and accountable. It's about asking when you're unsure, slowing down when things feel muddy, and doing the next right thing, even when it's hard. At JADE, we don't want ethics to feel like a rule book. We want it to be part of the culture, a place where it's safe to ask questions, to get support, and to keep learning. You are the culture. Your tone sets the tone. Your choices shape client safety. Your integrity builds trust. And here's one more piece. You also carry responsibility for what you see. If something feels off, unethical, unsafe, or even illegal, say something. Talk to your supervisor. Or better yet, if it feels safe to do so, talk to the person directly. Come from curiosity, not accusation. Say, hey, when you said or did that thing, it gave me pause. Can we talk about it? Sometimes folks don't realize the impact of their behavior. Sometimes they just need somebody to hold up a mirror. Approaching with care and compassion doesn't mean avoiding the conversation. It means doing it in a way that leaves room for growth. Because not saying something can look like co-signing. And we're not here to enable harmful behavior. We're here to protect a space where healing can happen for clients and for each other. The truth is, as JADE grows, there won't always be a director or a CEO right around the corner. That's why we need each of you, not to police one another, but to protect the values that we say we live by, not out of fear, but out of respect for what we're building together. This place only works because you care, because you show up, because you keep choosing to do the hard, kind, thoughtful things over and over again. So thank you for being here, for the work that you do, and for helping make JADE a place where ethics, recovery, and real human healing can actually happen.